I thought my husband was just working late. But when I showed up at his office with dinner, the security guard said, "Oh, he already left, with his assistant." My heart pounded as I drove to a nearby hotel. I watched as they checked in, laughing. The next morning, I waited in the lobby and greeted them as they walked out. My husband stammered, "It's not what it looks like." I smirked and said, "Oh, I know. That's why I booked a room too, for our lawyer." I was never the paranoid wife. I wasn't the type to check his phone, track his location, or question every late night at the office. I trusted him. I thought we were solid. I was wrong. This all happened a few months ago, and I'm still piecing myself back together. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's this: if something feels off, it probably is. It was a Wednesday. The kids were at my mom's for the night, so I decided to do something nice for my husband. Robert had been working late all week, coming home exhausted, barely talking before falling asleep. I figured he was just stressed. I mean, his job was demanding. Deadlines, clients, pressure. I never wanted to be the wife who made things harder. So, I made his favorite dinner, lasagna, garlic bread, even packed a slice of his favorite chocolate cake. Wrapped it up neatly, got in the car, and drove to his office in downtown Chicago. The whole way there, I felt good. I thought I was being thoughtful, loving. I had no idea I was about to walk straight into a nightmare. I pulled into the parking garage, grabbed the food, and walked into the lobby. The security guard, Tom, was sitting at his desk. He knew me. I'd brought Robert dinner a few times before. "Hey, Mrs. Carter," Tom said, looking a little confused. "Hey, Tom," I said, holding up the bag. Figured I'd surprise Robert with dinner. "He's still upstairs." Tom hesitated. It was barely noticeable, but I caught it. He shifted in his seat. "He's not here." I blinked. "What do you mean?" "He told me he was working late." Tom looked uncomfortable, like he wanted to be anywhere but here. "He left about 20 minutes ago." Something inside me tensed. "Left? Where?" Tom hesitated again. Then, quietly, like he was hoping I wouldn't hear him, he left with Claire. Claire. His assistant. The one I had met at a few company events. The one he always said was just a work friend. I forced myself to stay calm. "Did he say where he was going?" Tom sighed, glancing around like he was worried someone would hear. "I probably shouldn't, Tom," I said, my voice steady. "Please." Another pause. Then, I heard them mention the Drake. A hotel. AF*King Hotel. My stomach dropped. My hands felt numb. I forced out a smile, thanked Tom, and walked out of the building like everything was fine. I got in my car. Sat there for a minute, staring at nothing. Then, I started driving. Traffic was a blur. The only thing I could hear was my own heartbeat, pounding so hard it hurt. I told myself there had to be another explanation. Maybe it was a late client dinner. Maybe she had a room booked for some work event. Maybe. Then I saw them. Robert's car was parked out front. And there they were, walking up the steps to the entrance. Laughing, Claire's hand brushed his arm. He leaned in and said something in her ear. She giggled. Giggle. The kind I hadn't heard in years. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I could have left. Could have gone home, cried, let it break me. Instead, I pulled into the lot, parked, and walked inside. The woman at the front desk smiled. "Welcome to the Drake. Checking in?" "Yes," I said, my voice shockingly steady. She clicked away on her keyboard. "How many nights?" "Just one." "Will you need help with your bags?" I forced a smile. "No bags." She handed me a key card. "Enjoy your stay." Oh, I would. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them. Claire laughing. Robert's hand on her back. The way they walked inside like it was normal. Like it was nothing. At some point, I must have drifted off, because the next thing I knew, sunlight was creeping through the curtains. I sat up, stretched, and checked the time. 7:30 a.m. I got dressed, fixed my hair, put on a fresh coat of lipstick. Then, I grabbed my coffee, walked down to the lobby, and waited. At 7:45 on the dot, the elevator dinged. And there they were. Robert in his suit, looking like a man who had slept peacefully. Claire, in yesterday's dress, looking like a woman who had just won. I stood up, smiling. "Good morning." Robert froze. Claire's face drained of color. I took a sip of my coffee. "Sleep well?" Robert didn't speak right away. He just stood there, blinking like his brain couldn't process what was happening. Claire, on the other hand, took a tiny step back, her lips parting slightly. Like maybe if she distanced herself from him, she could disappear altogether. "Jenna." Robert finally choked out. His voice was hoarse, like his mouth had gone dry. "What are you?" I tilted my head. "What am I doing here?" I took another slow sip of my coffee. I could ask you the same thing. He opened his mouth, closed it, then ran a hand through his hair. His usual confident, put-together look was slipping fast. It's not what it looks like. I let out a small laugh, sharp, humorless. Oh, come on. That's the best you've got. His jaw tensed. Claire, meanwhile, had gone stiff as a statue. Her eyes flicked between me and Robert, like she was waiting for him to fix this. But he couldn't. Because there was no fixing this. Robert cleared his throat. Jenna, let's go outside. Talk privately. Why? I shrugged. Claire was there all night. I don't mind her hearing the conversation too. Claire flinched. She had gone pale, and I could tell she was this close to bolting. Robert grabbed my arm. Not hard, but firm. Now. I yanked it away. Don't touch me. Something flickered across his face. Panic? Guilt? Maybe both. The lobby was full of people. Some guests were checking out, others were sipping their overpriced coffee, scrolling through their phones. And they were watching. The perfect businessman. The polished assistant. The wife standing in front of them, calm as a bomb waiting to go off. Robert must have noticed the stares because he lowered his voice. Please, Jenna. Just come outside. I let the moment stretch out, just long enough to watch him squirm. Then I nodded. Fine. Let's talk. But I led the way. The second we stepped outside, Robert grabbed my hand again. This time, I shoved him off me so hard he actually stumbled back a step. Don't, I snapped. His face twisted with frustration. You're making a scene. I laughed louder than necessary. Oh, Robert. We passed scene about 12 hours ago when you checked into a hotel with your assistant. He glanced around like he was worried someone would hear. It wasn't like that. I crossed my arms. Then explain it to me. Because from where I was sitting, it looked exactly like that. He exhaled, pressing his fingers to his temples. Jenna, please. Let's just what? I cut him off. Pretend it didn't happen? Should I go home, warm up your lasagna, and act like you weren't screwing someone else last night? He flinched. Good. He looked down, ran a hand through his hair. It wasn't supposed to, don't finish that sentence. My voice was ice. Because if you say, happen, I swear to God, Robert, I was going to tell you, he said quickly. I blinked. My mind stalled for a second. Excuse me? His Adam's apple bobbed. I was going to tell you. I didn't know how. Something sharp twisted in my chest. Tell me what, exactly? He hesitated, like he was debating whether to go all in. Then he let out a breath. I haven't been happy, he said. The words hit like a slap. I actually took a step back. Not because I was shocked. No, I had been exhausted for months, holding together a marriage that felt more like a business partnership. I had felt the distance. I never thought he would be this kind of person. I swallowed the lump in my throat. So you solved that by sleeping with Claire? He winced. I didn't mean for it to happen. I held up a hand. Stop saying that. Silence stretched between us. He shifted his weight, his face falling into something that almost resembled regret. I never wanted to hurt you, Jenna. I stared at him. Really looked at him. The man I married was gone. And this version of him? I didn't even recognize him. Something inside me cracked open. Not sadness. Not even anger. Clarity. I straightened my shoulders. Smoothed out my coat. Looked him dead in the eyes and said, You don't have to figure out how to tell me, Robert. His brows furrowed. What do you? I took a step forward, my voice even final. Because you've already lost me. His eyes widened. Jenna, wait. I turned on my heel and walked back inside. And I didn't look back. I had planned to go home, process, call my lawyer. But as I reached the hotel lobby, something unexpected happened. Claire was still there. She was standing near the elevators, arms crossed, talking to someone, a man. I slowed my steps. He was furious. Gesturing wildly, his voice too low for me to hear. Claire looked nervous. And then I saw it. A wedding ring. Oh! My stomach dropped. Claire wasn't just the other woman. She was a wife. She must have felt my stare because she turned, locking eyes with me. For the first time, she looked scared. I tilted my head, taking a slow sip of my coffee. Claire turned back to the man, shaking her head rapidly. Denying. But I knew what I saw. And so did he. Because his next words? I heard them loud and clear. Don't lie to me, Claire. I know everything. And just like that, the game changed. I wasn't planning on staying. I had said what I needed to say. I had left Robert standing in the cold, probably trying to figure out how to spin this into something less catastrophic for himself. I should have walked out of that hotel, driven home, and started the next phase of my life. But then Claire's husband showed up. And suddenly, I wasn't just a wife catching her husband cheating. I was about to watch 2 marriages explode. The words hit her like a bullet. She physically flinched. Her husband, let's call him Mark, was standing in front of her, his face twisted in a mix of anger and betrayal. He was a tall guy, maybe a little older than Robert, dressed like he had just come from work. Unlike me, he didn't look calm. He looked like a man who had spent all night putting together a puzzle he never wanted to solve. Claire opened her mouth, but no words came out. She looked like a cornered animal, wide-eyed and frantic. I leaned against the wall near the hotel's coffee bar, pretending to check my phone while keeping my ears wide open. How did you, Claire started, her voice barely above a whisper. Mark let out a dry laugh. How did I find out? He pulled out his phone, tapped the screen a few times, and held it up. You left your location sharing on. Claire's entire face drained of color. Oh. That was brutal. Mark shook his head, shoving his phone back into his pocket. Do you know what it's like to check your wife's location and see her at AF*King Hotel on a Wednesday night? Claire's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. I can explain. Mark laughed again. Oh, please. Go ahead. I'd love to hear this. She hesitated. Then, like a light bulb went off in her head, she straightened her shoulders. And turned to me. For a second, I thought I heard her wrong. My fault? I repeated, raising an eyebrow. Claire pointed a manicured finger at me, her expression shifting from guilt to desperation. You followed Robert here. You made a scene. If you hadn't shown up, Mark wouldn't have found out. Mark's head snapped toward me, like he was just now realizing I was part of this mess. Wait, he said, his voice low. You're Robert's wife? I nodded. Yep. His eyes darkened. Jesus Christ. Claire, meanwhile, kept her attention on me, breathing heavily like she was about to hyperventilate. You ruined everything, she hissed. I let out a short, sharp laugh. The audacity. I stepped closer, my voice low and deadly calm. Claire, let me make something very clear to you. I leaned in slightly, so only she and Mark could hear me. I didn't ruin anything. You and Robert did that all by yourselves. Her eyes flicked between me and Mark. I could see her brain scrambling, trying to find a way out of this. There was none. Mark suddenly let out a breath, running a hand through his hair. Jesus, he muttered again. Robert. I should have known. King should have known. Wait. I narrowed my eyes. Should have known? Something in the way he said it sounded off. Like he wasn't surprised. Like this wasn't new. Before I could ask what he meant, Mark let out a humorless chuckle. Robert's done this before, he said. The words sent a chill through me. I blinked. Excuse me? Mark glanced at me, his expression unreadable. You think this is the first time? He shook his head, exhaling sharply. Jesus. He's been screwing around for years. The world tilted for a second. No, I said automatically. No, that's not, he wouldn't. But even as I said it, something inside me cracked. Because I knew. The late nights. The unexplained business trips. The way he had slowly become a stranger in our own home. I had ignored it. Mark let out a dry laugh. Yeah, Claire isn't even the first one. He turned to her, his voice laced with disgust. Hope you feel special. Claire looked like she was about to be sick. I swallowed the lump in my throat, my nails digging into my palms. So, I forced out, who else? Mark hesitated. Then, after a moment, he said a name. And my entire body went cold. Because I knew her. Personally. I couldn't breathe. She's your friend, isn't she? Mark said quietly, watching my face. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because he was right. Robert hadn't just cheated. He hadn't just lied. He had done it with someone I trusted. Suddenly, everything felt different. This wasn't just some assistant who made a mistake. This wasn't just one bad decision. This was calculated. This was deliberate. Robert had destroyed our marriage long before this moment. I was just the idiot who had finally caught up. Mark sighed, rubbing his temples. *CK this. I'm done. And then, he walked away. Claire tried to grab his arm. Mark, wait, but he shrugged her off. Didn't look back. Didn't say another word. Just left. Claire let out a sharp breath, her hands shaking as she watched him disappear out the doors. Then, slowly, she turned back to me. Her lips parted, like she wanted to say something. Maybe apologize. Maybe blame me again. But I didn't care. I had one thing left to do. And that was finish this. Claire and I stood there in silence, the weight of everything pressing down on us. Mark was gone. Robert was still outside, probably pacing in the parking lot, trying to figure out how to salvage the wreckage of his perfect little double life. And me? I was done. Claire swallowed hard, eyes darting to the exit like she was deciding whether to run after her husband or stay and fight for whatever scraps of dignity she had left. She made the wrong choice. She turned back to me. "This isn't all my fault," she whispered. I laughed. Sharp, humorless. "Oh, don't do that. Don't try to make yourself the victim in this." Her face twisted. "I'm not saying I'm innocent, but stop." I held up a hand. "Just stop." She shut her mouth. I took a slow breath, forcing myself to stay calm. I didn't want to be the screaming, sobbing, out-of-control wife. I wanted to be the woman who walked away with her head held high. So I straightened my shoulders and stepped forward. "You knew he was married." Claire's throat bobbed. You knew." Her lower lip trembled. It wasn't supposed to be serious. My laugh came out colder this time. "And that makes it better?" She had no answer. I leaned in, my voice steady. "Did you ever think about me? Did it ever cross your mind? Or were you too busy playing pretend with my husband?" Claire looked like she wanted to disappear. No, I cut her off. "I don't care what you were going to say. Because it doesn't matter." I shook my head. "You're nothing. You were just one in a long line of women Robert used. You don't get to play the heartbroken mistress. You're just another mistake he'll regret later." That one hit deep. Her face crumbled. Tears filled her eyes, but I didn't feel sorry for her. Not even a little. I turned, finally ready to leave, when the front door swung open. And there he was. Robert stormed in, his face tight with frustration. "Jenna," he said, out of breath. "Can we talk?" I crossed my arms. "About what?" His jaw flexed. "Can we please just what?" I tilted my head. "Work through this? Figure it out? You want to talk about our marriage now? After how many affairs?" A flicker of something crossed his face. He knew I knew. He had always counted on my silence. My loyalty. The fact that I never dug too deep. But now? Now, I wasn't playing along. Robert ran a hand through his hair, looking around. People were watching. The hotel staff, guests, strangers sipping their overpriced coffee, all of them could see. I wanted him to feel it. I wanted him to burn. So I said it. Loud, clear, unapologetic. "How many, Robert?" His face turned to stone. "Jenna, let's not do this here." I took a step closer. "No, let's do this. Right here. Right now." He exhaled sharply. "It wasn't, how many?" I repeated, my voice like a blade. Silence. His eyes flicked to Claire, then back to me. That was his answer. I laughed, shaking my head. God. I was so stupid. Robert stepped forward. "Jenna, please, what?" I snapped. "Please stay? Please believe whatever bullshit excuse you've rehearsed in your head? Please let you crawl back into our bed and pretend like none of this happened." He didn't answer. Because he knew. He knew there was no fixing this. I nodded slowly, feeling the last remnants of whatever love I had for this man crumble into dust. "You've lost me," I said quietly. His breath hitched. I let that hang between us for a moment. Let him feel it. Then I turned around and walked out the door. I don't remember the drive home. I don't remember unlocking the front door or kicking off my shoes or sinking onto the couch. But I do remember the silence. It was heavy, suffocating. And yet, underneath all of that, relief. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for something to break. It already had. Robert sent texts. Called. Begged to meet. I didn't answer. Claire? I don't know what happened to her. I didn't care. Mark? He sent me an email a few weeks later. Just a short message saying, "Glad we both got out." I smiled when I read it. Because he was right. We got out. Divorce was messy. He fought for everything, tried to guilt me, manipulate me, even told the kids I was giving up on the family. But I didn't bend. And in the end, I got what I wanted. Freedom. Now, months later, I'm still healing. Some days are easier than others. Some nights, the memories creep in, and I wonder how I didn't see it sooner. But you know what? I'm okay. Because I finally understand something. I wasn't the woman who lost her husband. I was the woman who walked away. And that's power.